Hi group. This week we are looking at the gender identity and sexual orientation readings and exploring those theories and development models. And this was really interesting because I think I just think it really applies to how we can help students in our student affairs professional venues, and how we come in contact with students in the gender identity development area every day. I feel like I do every day. And I feel like with myself, I deal more primarily with high school students because of my current field. I think when I look at these developmental models and these gender and sexual orientation identity models and theories, I think I see students in one place of the model, in one stage or one process, as opposed to students we generally see in student affairs that are in a different stage. That may be more advanced, or maybe not, but possibly more advanced and more secure and comfortable with where they're at. So, anyway, so I found it very interesting and very applicable this week. And in looking at the sexual identity development theories, I thought the book, Evans, did a very good job of, it really put the model, it broke the theories down, the gender identity theories, into basically two models, it broke the theories into two categories that they could be in. Sociological, which focuses more on the impact of community and development, social roles, and managing the stigma and the coming out process. And then the second category is a psychological theories, which concentrate more on the internal changes, and such as the growing awareness and the formation and the self-image, personal decisions, and that type of thing, and especially how it really helps to, it talks about how they identify with non-heterosexual. They identify themselves as non-heterosexual. So that was very interesting how it categorized it, and it broke it down into the two main categories. To me, it helped me to kind of look at it in that way. And then, of course, both of these categories have been identified with the four general levels that are common in both models. And those are 1, awareness; 2, self-labeling; 3, community involvement and disclosure; and 4, identity integration. So that was interesting, just a broad overview. As far as the two articles, Tyrone, that you referenced, those, when I looked at those, I also couldn't help but to compare that with Kaz's model of sexual orientation identity formation. And I kept in my mind comparing Kaz's model with Angeli. I know I'm butchering the name. Oh, I'm just going to call him D. How about that? D, with the model identity of sexual orientation. Let me just talk about D's model for a minute, the lifespan model. It's a nonlinear model, and it argued that the sexual identity is nonlinear, and it varies depending on the context. And to me, this really focused more on environmental, and the environmental context, the social situations, and the interactions with different people, which led to what he really focused on was the revisions. And the revisions are the revisions of an individual's sexual identity. These revisions were based on the 3 factors that he identified or produced in his theory. And I like how the book actually really broke down the 3 factors as being the personal subjectivities and behaviors, and that talks about the ways in which they perceive their experiences, and how they choose to act on them. The second factor was the interactive intimacies, which talks about the attitudes, values, and behaviors of peers and how that influences that factor. And the socio-historical connections, which is the past settings and in like specific residence hall environments in which the students may have lived, or the environmental factor. So that was D's. That was it. Really focused on those 3 factors. But how I found that correlated really with Kaz's model is, of course, Kaz differs in the fact of it's more of a linear progression, whereas Dee's is more of it is a non-linear. So he focuses more on the processes, saying that, you know, a student, an individual could be at different stages, at different ages. It's non-linear. Whereas Kaz's model is more of a progression. You have to go through the first before you can get to the next, and so on. But the way that they are similar is that they both identify 6 areas, where D calls them processes, and Kaz calls them stages. But I thought it was interesting that they seem to correlate their stages and processes, but the main difference to me was where which I found interesting, because to me I think this should be an area that is identified, is the obvious one is the 4th process that D identifies as becoming becoming a lesbian, gay, or bisexual offspring. And to me, and it talks about coming out to your parents, and you know, that to me that seems like that obviously is a part of, that would be a large part of the process for your parents to be accepting, to be able to be open with them and not have to hide anything. So I think that is a large area. In my eyes, that seems like that would be a large area. So I seem to identify more with, or see the vision more in the theory of Dee's model, as opposed to Kaz's model of Kaz's model of sexual orientation identity formation, which of course Dee's model it's more recent than Kaz's model. It was it is a little bit older. So, but as far as Tyrone, as far as your questions, you asked how student affairs professionals, how can student affairs professionals assist students who identify themselves differently than the predominantly heterosexual society, other than organizational engagement. And I think Kaz's model, or in the book, in Evan's book, when it's talking about Kaz's theory, it pointed out that listening to how students feel is important. And I think that's a big part of it, is, you know, letting them just describe to you where they're at, not trying to fit them into an area, but listening to where they're at, because sometimes maybe they don't realize where they're at. And as a student affairs professional, if we can listen to where they're at with the knowledge and background that we have in this area, we can help them, and we can identify what stage they are and try and help them with whatever conflict, you know, whether it's them being an activist in their area, or maybe they're, have more aggression toward the heterosexual society, or whatever it is. I mean, there's different stages that they could be in. So I think it's our duty as student affairs professionals to listen to them, and it's important to let them describe their identities to us. And then we need to be familiar with the issues they face at those stages. So I think that's what we can do to help them out. Also, you asked, how can we as student affairs professionals help minimize the social invisibility a person, an individual experiences with sexual orientation? Basically, how can we help students minimize the barrier? Again, I think about Kaz's stage 6, where it says identity synthesis, and how individuals judge others based on their personal qualities rather than solely on their sexual identity. I think we need to not only, obviously we wouldn't just focus on their identity. I mean, it's a part of them, but that's not the whole part of them, of a student. We need to help them get to know them as a person, and it's just an aspect. It's not the whole person. So I think that's something, obviously we need to help them and where they're at and help them grow, but there's more than just that. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this week's reading. I can't wait for our discussion this week about the different theories and how they mesh together and how they may not mesh together. So I will see you all in class.